lesson this evening is entitled Hold Each Other Up. I had young men this week from College Ridge College that are students who are studying to be preachers, and I asked them this question: do you know her is in the Bible? Now, her was a man. After a minute or two, a little prodding, they got it. They knew who her was. Do you know who her is in the Bible? We're going to find out. There's an expression, he's not heavy, he's my brother. And the idea that we lift each other up, we care for each other, and we share with each other, and we do things for each other is the idea. But we hold each other up because we all want to get to heaven, and we all want our reward. In Exodus chapter 17, beginning in verse 8, we have the account. And Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, choose some. He didn't say every single one of them. He said, choose some men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand at the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. Now, this battle goes all the way back to Esau and Jacob, because Esau sold his birthright for a pot of stew. But their people have been conflicting ever since then, and this battle really is a battle between the people of Jacob and the people of Esau. So Joshua prepared for battle. He got everything ready. And it says, so Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was when Moses held up his hands that Israel prevailed, and when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. And so they march off to war. And as they're going, there is the importance that Moses hold his hands up. But Moses' hands became heavy. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, and Aaron and Hur supported his hand, one on one side and on the other side. And his hands were steadied until the going down of the sun. We're not talking about 15 minutes. We're talking about 4, 5, 6 hours. This is a long time. And it was important that they held his hands up, because if he dropped his hands, it went to the other side. And so he needed some help. He couldn't do it by himself. And Aaron and Hur helped him held up his hands. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And so they go out there and they're victorious, and they come back and report, we have done it. With God's help, we have done it. God had to be part of the battle. God had to fight the battle. God's the one who gave them the victory. And then it says, then the Lord said to Moses, write this for a memorial in the book and recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called his name, the Lord is my banner. For he said, because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. And so he builds this altar of stones, and he makes an offering to the Lord, because the Lord gave them the victory, and it was to give honor to him. I mentioned this morning, it's important in our prayers that we also have prayers of thanksgiving. And this was a thankfulness to God. So number one, Israel succeeded as long as Moses held up his hands. I like this picture better because it's got the rod there, and it says that he held up the rod. And as long as that rod was up, they prevailed. But he got weary. He needed some help. It was too hard for Moses to do all by himself. And sometimes we have tasks that are put before us. It's too hard for just us to do it, and we need a little help from our friends. You've heard that before. So Aaron and Hur held up his hands, and the fate of Israel depends upon Moses' intercession. As long as Moses held up his hand, he interceded for the people, They would prevail and win, and they did what God told them to do. Now, what happens when we do not carry out our work? What happens when we don't do our part? Well, things begin to fall away. Things don't happen like you should. And a guy who's building a house needs all the people who work together, the plumber, the electrician. Everybody's got to work together to make it happen. Well, in the church, we all work together to happen. I have a story about Texas Tech. This is where I worked. And there was a lady, and she had been promoted up, and they had hired a person to replace that person. And this person over here was too good to do that person's job. And what happened was that somebody came along and the system froze. It was called HealthNet. And what it did, it froze up. He couldn't get the slides to move. It couldn't get anything to happen. And so he called for help. Well, the lady who did that job was out sick. So they called the lady who had been doing that job to do it. And guess what she said? That is beneath me. I used to do it, but I don't do it no more. So, this was the dean of the school of medicine. And that dean called his secretary, and he told to have the number one guy in the department, the head of the department, the vice president, come to that classroom and get that going. And the vice president came, he saw the problem, he called that lady, and she said, oh, I don't do that no more. I'm too good to go down there and do that. And that guy says, you better get here, and you better get here now. We got to do our part. We got to help each other out. My department didn't work like that. That's not my department, that was that department. My department got the award for the greatest department in the whole institution that year because we did our jobs, and if somebody wasn't there, I got out and I did their job. We always did our job. But when people think that they're too good to do something, things fall down and it doesn't work. And so we've got to do our part. In 1 Peter 5 and verse 6, therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. So we got to be humble servants serving the Lord. And in the NIV, it says, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. I like the idea of being lifted up. In due time, we'll be lifted up. Number 2, when Moses' hands were heavy, he could not keep it up. Aaron and Hur came to help. They came up with a solution. If he sat on this rock, they could hold his hands up. They were solvers of problems. They weren't problem making. They were trying to figure out how to help. Are we willing to help even when the task is something small? I don't think any of us would say, well, that's beneath me. I can't do that. We put in elbow grease and we get the job done. That's what the type of people we are. And what power can be obtained when we join together in prayer? I think that Cliff made it through with flying colors partly because we came together and we prayed for him. We have great power with God's help. But without God, we don't have that power. In Isaiah 35, verses 3 and 4, it says, strengthen the weak hands and make firm the weak knees. Help those who are weak. Help them out. Get those doors open. Do things for other people to show that you appreciated them. Say to those who are fearful-hearted, be strong, do not fear. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. With the recompense of God, he will come and save you. God's going to be on our side. We work for him. So encourage people to trust in God. That's always important. In Hebrews chapter 12, I took this from the English Standard Version. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons, for what son is there whose father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. I worked in a daycare, and you probably could relate to this. There were some parents that didn't discipline their kids. And here I am at school trying to discipline them, and some parents cooperated and some parents didn't. They didn't know what it was like to obey rules and things like that, but we got to do it. So we don't want to be without discipline, we want to be with discipline. Besides this, we have an earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the fathers of spirits and live? For they discipline us for a short time as it seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. So the discipline we get is to help us to grow in our lives with Christ. For at the moment, all discipline seems to be painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Therefore, lift up your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees, and make straight the paths for your feet, so they will, what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. And that makes sense. We discipline our children so they don't touch the hot stove and get burnt. We discipline our children so they don't run out in the street and get run over by a car. We discipline ourselves so that we obey God. And that's important. Strive for peace with everyone and for holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, and that no root of bitterness springs up and cause trouble, and by it many become defiled. So we need to discipline, to focus on living for God and to strengthening one another. So we're here to lift each other up, to build each other, because we have the great journey ahead and we want to go to heaven. And we work together towards that. In James chapter 4 and verse 10, it says, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. And that is a wonderful thought, that he lifts us up, and we serve him as humble servants. But when we go out and we blow our own horn, we toot it too high. You may have heard that expression before. Here's a quote: when our work speaks for itself, don't interrupt. What a good thing. All right, number 3, Moses built an altar. The Lord is my banner. He built that altar. In Psalm 60 and verse 4, you have given a banner to those who fear you, that it may be displayed because of the truth. Our banner over us is love. God is wanting us, and we sing several songs along that time, but the idea is that the Lord is our banner. We stand with the Lord. In Isaiah chapter 11 in verse 10, and in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, who shall stand as a banner to the people, for the Gentiles shall seek him, and his resting place shall be glorious. It's going to open the door to the Gentiles to come to Christ. And our banner today is the cross. And Jesus died for us. He gave his life for us. Number 4, how can we strengthen each other? Make yourself more useful. There's a lot of things that can be done if you make yourself useful to the Lord. He knows and he rewards those who serve him. And then there's the second mile by Stephen Moore. I like this. Stern duty said, go walk a mile and help thy brother bear his load. I walked reluctant, but meanwhile my heart grew soft with help bestowed. Then love said, go another mile. I went, and duty spoke no more. But love arose with a smile and took all the burden that I bore. 'Tis ever thus when duty calls, if we spring quickly to obey, love comes, and whatever befalls, we are glad to help another day. The second mile we walk with joy. Heaven's peace goes with us on the road. So let us with all our powers employ to help our brothers bear life's load. We are here to build one another up In Galatians chapter 6 and verse 2, bear one another's burden and so fulfill the law of Christ. Man one. Let me tell you, this is a little parable here. All right, he has 2 sacks. We'll give him his 2 sacks. The first sack are the bad things that happened to me, and he gets them out and he looks at them all the time. And his second sack is the good things friends and family have done for me, and he carries that on his back because he focuses on the bad things rather than the good things. And his load is kind of heavy because he keeps stopping after a little while and saying, this bad thing happened to me, this bad thing happened to me. And he didn't make much progress. Man number 2, he's got the same 2 bags, the front sack, good things I have done, and I take them out and show them to others. Here's the good things I've done, and I show it to everybody around. I don't make much progress because I'm always stopping. And then the one on his back, I keep all my mistakes in it and carry it all the time. And it becomes a burden to carry that sack. But we have man 3. Whoops. I needed to work on that. The front sack is positive thoughts I have about people and blessings that I experience. So it's a positive back. The back sack is completely in it. I cut a hole in it and put all the bad things in it so I don't have to carry it all the time. I wished I was always like the last man, but I'm not always like that. But I'm working on that. I'm working on being positive and having, those blessings to share. But whenever we carry all our burdens on our back, it weighs us down, and it's not the way we ought to be. Well, in this story, in this lesson, we saw that Moses got the victory because his arms were upheld, and they got the victory because they did what God told them to do. Jesus left heaven to come to earth here to dwell as a man. He died on the cross for our sins. He is buried in the tomb. He arose again, and he's coming back. If you have a need, won't you come while together we stand and sing?